Hey gang, what's up? Today we're gonna do something a bit different. Um, I'm gonna kind of recommend 12 people who I think have really improved my life um, by being exposed to them, and so I think at least one of them surely will be able to rock your world. So that's the idea. So in no particular order. I've got like an mnemonic device in my head to remember the first letter of each. So we'll just go through them. Um, but I think they're all interesting for different reasons. So I've kind of tried to choose just people who I think are kind of special in some way and of some sort of dank level of novelty or interest. So I hope you enjoy. So here I am as the conduit between you and a more enjoyable existence, hopefully. So we're going to begin with Bob Dylan, who I got into, I guess, as a teenager at first. And it's just like levels. Bob Dylan's like a cult, you know? There's levels. You get deeper and deeper, or higher and higher. Um, but yeah, I think on a basic level, Dylan's like Shakespeare. I think basically it's like that level. Like he's on the same level as William Shakespeare, probably. I would say. Um, yeah, I mean, very. Of course, it's the kind of thing where you have to. You can go look up best of Bob Dylan, or just go get a little bit. And it's gone through so many different phases, so many eras. So some of that might resonate more with you than others, but like I started being really drawn to the acoustic stuff, and then started to get more into the electric rock and roll stuff, and then later on, eventually into Joker Man and like kind of like more 80s feel, or even Ring Them Bells or whatever, and like later stuff even when he's like 80 now, something a bit more than 80, I think. Maybe he's still 80, and still he released an album like in 2020, which is really good. Like not all the songs I'm like, oh yeah, that's amazing, but it's like, oh, it's pretty good. But there's some songs on there I'm like, that's an incredible song. And he's um yeah, I mean he's like, if you're not aware of Bob Dylan, you could look him up, but he's generally regarded as one of the most, if not the most influential artist of the 20th century. Um, like very, a lot of people who you would love, music you love, they would be inspired by him directly or by someone who was inspired by him. So he's kind of like grandfather figure. Um, but yeah, so his music, why do I like it? Well, it's very poetic, very poignant. A lot of it deals with kind of like as an energy of a beautiful sadness, like an emotional openness and vulnerability, and it's very in honesty. There's a range. Some of them it's like protest songs or something. It's like expressing righteous indignation and this some sort of desire to make progress in the world, or to um, cherish or uplift good values or whatever. The old same old thing. Um, but a lot of it is just, yeah, it's just a very, what has in the common denominator or whatever is um, very lucid, kind of vivid, beautiful, like imagery, very colorful imagery, and very hypnotically engaging use of poetry, basically, with music. And the music, like some very original melodies and chord progressions, and like the music side's also very good. Um, and like a Rolling Stone was very revolutionary, like songwriting wise, and a lot of his stuff was. Um, but and his voice, people, give him shit for his voice, but he's singing in key almost all the time. Like some of the records, he's off a bit, like maybe he's, too much in the sauce or something. But like it's kind of like a funny meme. But it's like people who make fun of Ringo Starr, and then apparently my brother was, in this drumming class, and he's like, what do we think of Ringo Starr, the teacher? And then everyone's like, ha, 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 yeah. You know, it's like we like to make fun of the omega, you know, and be like, ha, ha, yeah, thank God I'm not at the bottom of the pile. If I'm making fun of them, then that means I'm not at the bottom, right? But then the teacher's like, yeah, see, you're all wrong. He's amazing. He's a genius. Like, it's very subtle, but he's an incredible drummer, which you could hear if you like listen to She Said, She Said. You know. She said, I know what it's like to be dead. Great drums. Anyway, but Bob Dylan's a bit like that. Like, people like to make fun of the voice, and yeah, whatever, cool. You know, who doesn't like to make fun of stuff? But yeah, it's actually really good, and like many different types of voice I appreciate. You know, like over time, like he uses different parts of. Anyway, you'd have to get into it yourself. I won't belabor the point with each of these, but so. And if you go really deep, I think there's like a mystical, like it's almost like a spiritual teacher kind of thing with Dylan. Like there's a, you know, he's not I'm sure he's not a perfect person. There's stories of him being, you know, a bit snarky to people or whatever, you know, like unlike you and me, we don't do that, right? Never, yeah. But I think, like, you know, he was really young and everyone was like, oh, you're like the spokesperson for a generation. You're like Jesus, you know, and putting all this stuff in him, and even more subtle stuff like, oh yeah, you're really good, aren't you? You know, and he kind of showed this and you can look at, you know, videos. Look at the San Francisco 1965 interview where all the press are interviewing him, and they're just projecting all this stuff on him, and it's very, very interesting. Like, there's this desire to make him into a character or someone that you can understand, label him, or, you know, put these things on there for good or bad. And he's kind of curiously, for such a young person, he's curiously immune to it, and kind of just being like, no, like, you know, I am, you know, kind of who I am. And kind of, it seems like there's this spiritual dimension of like a willingness or an unwillingness to label things, and a deep desire just to be in the present moment, and to use language in a way which is communicating a sincerity. But part of that is that not overreaching with language and saying this is what it is, that's what it is, this is what that song means, that's what that song means. But just being like, well, I don't know. It creates an impression, and people think like, oh, it's the volcano mind in my brain, the hurricane elves can't explain. I was up and down and round about when the morning curtains did twirls through my mouth. You know, like, kind of, oh, it doesn't make any sense. But it's a bit more controlled than that. And it's like, but there's ones where he's very specifically, you know, making points with like the lyrics and stuff. But then there's a lot of the songs, a lot of the great stuff, very good stuff, is like, he's kind of got this looser filter. It's kind of like taking, you know, a picture or something with a blurry lens or something, or like painting, you know, and without necessarily doing it really too much detail. But it's kind of like he is able to communicate feelings through just these words with these associations. It's like, what does that mean? Who knows? But it popped up from the unconscious. He had a certain intention, a certain feeling he was feeling, and then he's by not forcing it into words which, you know, are too small a container for this feeling, he's able to channel something which otherwise you'd have to filter down and you'd miss a lot of it. But you'll get what I mean, I think, if you try it out. So some great songs I'd recommend. I'm going to play Boots of Spanish Leather, which is one of my favorite songs. I'd also recommend Tomorrow Is a Long Time, Oh Sister, Joker Man, Like a Rolling Stone, of course. Visions of Johanna. I mean, there's too many really to... Could I give one more? What's an incredible Dylan song? If you want to hear his voice and actually realize, oh, okay, this guy can actually sing. All I Really Want to Do. How's it? That's it. I ain't trying to compete with you, beat, treat, or mistreat you, classify you and advertise you, deny, defy, or crucify you. All I really wanna do is, baby, be friends with you. And of course he does a better job than that, but you get the idea. All right, so here's a little song called Boots of Spanish Leather. I guess I will I'll give just a few tastier verses, although they're all incredibly tasty. I'm sailing away, my own true love. I'm sailing away in the morning. Is there something I can send you from across the seas, from the place that I'll be landing? There's nothing you can send me, my own true love. There's nothing I'm wishing to be owning, just to carry yourself back to me unspoiled from across that lonesome ocean. Oh, I just thought you might want something fine, made of silver or of golden, either from the mountains of Madrid or the coast of Barcelona. Oh, but if I had the stars from the darkest night, or the diamonds from the deepest ocean, I'd forsake them all for your sweet kiss, and that's all I'm wishing to be owning. Righto. So that's Bob Dylan. Okay, so we'll give everyone else a tenth of the time that Dylan got. Of course. So, all right, let's see here. Graham Hancock. So Graham Hancock really blew my mind. One of the first really, probably the first really amazing podcast I listened to was a friend of mine, buddy from Canada, Stephen Jarvis. Shout out to Canadian Steve. He were like 20 years old and was lying on the floor of his room in freezing Edmonton, Alberta. I just arrived and he was like, yeah, I think you like this. And I put on this Joe Rogan podcast with interviewing Graham Hancock. And I'm really into history, you know? And so, Joe begins like saying, yeah, you've changed my view of history like so much, you know? And I was thinking, okay, that's interesting. Does this guy know nothing about history? Possibly. Or like, okay, what is it? What's this guy's angle? What's so interesting? But then by the end of it, I was like, I said to him, I think that just changed my life, that podcast, which kind of, I think, surprised my friend. But like, basically, what I like about Graham Hancock, he's a journalist. He doesn't work for like newspapers these days anymore, but he did. He was the East Africa correspondent for The Economist, and so he was like a full-on journalist back in the day. But he's last several decades, he went from being interested in the current affairs to being interested in the past, and so he's basically investigates ancient mysteries and things that don't make sense, and little because you have all these with archaeology or history or Egyptology or whatever, you have all these experts who are very specialized and they have immense understanding about one particular aspect of things. But the generalists who put everything together, that's a very important thing. And in general, the way we approach knowledge in this modern scientific world, like you have multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary studies and stuff, but in general, a lot of it is very fragmented and like, kind of a mirror, as above, so below, a mirror of the way we kind of reductionism and the way we break everything into its constituent parts. So for example, how we say love is just a chemical or a series of chemical processes. It's not, oh yeah, there's a series of chemical processes and there's a thing called love. It's like, no, there's this, okay, that's all it is. Or, the holistic health, understanding like, no, everything's interconnected. Mind and body are two sides of the same coin, that kind of thing, So something I think that our civilization's learning, and it's, takes time to learn these things, right? So no worries. But anyway, Hancock, he is kind of, he plays a very useful role of he asks lots of questions, and he'll be asking a lot of controversial questions and some which are pretty far out, and you might go, make you frown, like, is this guy nuts, every now and then. But then, after digging deeper into him, I kind of realized, like, no, he asks lots of questions and he's always very reasonable. He won't say, oh, this is true. Like I've almost never heard him say something where it's like, yeah, this is some fact, and then there's nothing to back it up. Because he tends to, always operate with questions. Is it possible that this is the case? And so he's kind of probing around, performing that role of like the generalist who puts things together, and kind of takes the expertise of others and kind of channels it and combines it. And so he's got a bunch of books, Fingerprints of the Gods, Magicians of the Gods, America Before, Supernatural, which I think is now called Visionary. He's got some novels too, which are really good, actually. But yeah, but basically, the main thing which blew my mind about him, apart from that, he's a lot of good points on like how, the war on drugs is an exercise in brainwashing, basically. It's like, there's all, many little angles of things where it's like, interesting, good point. Like anything bad, for example, if you didn't check out my episode on the war on drugs, Surrendering the War on Drugs, I think it's episode 11, then it basically, great point he made is like, for anything bad you can do, we already have laws. Anything bad you can do on drugs, we already have laws against that. Whether you're sober or on drugs, it doesn't matter. We have a law for it. So why are we adding a law penalizing what you put in your body as an adult? Especially since a lot of them affect your consciousness, the way you perceive things. And if the government can control your consciousness and you're not free to explore your own perspective, then what kind of freedom can you really claim to have? And he makes a good argument that actually is why a lot of these things are, and he will kind of frame it as a question, but usually, I think, but that, coincidence that drugs which allow us to work and not ask questions, they're all legal. Cigarettes, alcohol, sugar, coffee, alcohol and cigarettes kill enormous numbers of people, but they don't make you question things too much. Whereas some other ones, which are very healthy and have great medicinal benefits, are somehow illegal still, and don't kill anyone. So anyway, so I'd recommend, so he gets into all these sort of interesting things, but the main thing is the possibility of a lost civilization. Basically that 12,800 years ago to 11,600 years ago, there's a period called the Younger Dryas. It's basically when the last ice age was ending. And there's a bunch of cataclysms. And he makes very good cases, bring together a whole bunch of different evidence that there was an advanced civilization. We don't know exactly what, was going on there or how advanced, but advanced enough to, for example, have mapped the world, because there are maps of Antarctica from before we discovered it, before the modern world discovered it. And those map makers said, we are basing this on older source maps from Library of Alexandria, like old stuff. And so it seems like there are these, and that's just one example, but there are many pieces of evidence suggesting that humans were advanced much longer than we have thought. And surprise, surprise, we don't know everything yet. We're still just like you're going up the mountain. Oh, we'll be there in 5 minutes. We're nearly at the top. An hour later, oh, looks just as far away. So, it's easy to get ahead of ourselves or, count our chickens before they hatch. But I think the wise mind is a humble mind, and that says, actually, there's a lot we don't know. We should, if we keep our mind open to the possibility that we're wrong, we will be wrong less often, and we will learn things faster. And so I'd highly encourage you to get into Graham Hancock stuff. He talks a lot about ayahuasca as well and the healing powers of that visionary tea, or you could call it a drug, but basically it's been used in the Amazon for thousands of years. It's a kind of tea they make, and it's got incredible benefits for like health, psychological and physical, but mostly psychological, helping people overcome addiction, depression, anxiety, all kinds of stuff. So check out Graham Hancock, he's great. And very beautiful with his language as well, I should say, and just a very heart-centered person. He's got a certain, some people, might be put off a bit because at certain times he'll get, angry with, there's an angry energy that comes out of like, the basically against the forces of what he would call, I think fairly reasonably, ignorance and suppression of free discourse, because there's certain, situations where there's been some pretty foul play and dirty tricks going on with like the conversations and the character assassinations, people calling him a pseudoscientist and all this crazy stuff. So I can see why, a human being would get angry with that, and maybe if that anger helps someone push through in the darker times to keep going and do the good work, and so long as mostly the vast majority of the time they're centered in their heart, as he is, then I think that's something, that's all, there's many people like that, including yours truly, haven't totally transcended anger. So, all right, 3, what do we got? Well, Joe Rogan. Okay, so Rogan is incredible. I highly recommend you check out Joe Rogan's podcast, The Joe Rogan Experience. I believe it's the biggest podcast in the world. It's been kind of crazy. I've been following it for like 10 years. So yeah, since that episode with Graham Hancock in early 2012. I think it started in 2011, podcast. And it wasn't that huge. Like not many people, but then, so I've kind of seen it like take off. Like, I wasn't there at the very beginning or anything, but like it's crazy to see like, whoa, this thing's gotten huge. And it totally makes sense because this guy, like again, Rogan is very honest, very direct. He asks uncomfortable questions. He doesn't mind making guests uncomfortable, but in a respectful way. But they will try to dodge a question, and like maybe a normal journalist would go, all right, you've dodged it twice, I'll let you go. He'll be like, but you're not answering the question, and he'll just like, oh Jesus, I'm stuck in this guy's like studio. What do I do? I'm on live internet, whatever. But again, he's a heart-centered guy, and he is very curious and likes exploring things very methodically. And he'll have all kinds of people: scientists, journalists, politicians, other podcasters, comedians, because he's a comedian by trade, and business people, authors, musicians, all kinds of people, MMA fighters, because he's a cage commentator also. So, and he's opened my eyes to a lot of stuff, especially about health, and the importance of health and the connection between a healthy body and a healthy mind, and even just a powerful mind, the ability to be wise and to be in the know, and the body, you must take care of the body, and many things. I've learned so much through that, and it's a great point, to check them out. Like they're like 3 hours long, and yet millions of people are tuning in for 3 hours at a time, like on the regular. And so it's one of those things where it's kind of like shows you people are actually a bit smarter than you might get credit for from like certain corners. And it's a great place to find new people, like new podcasts and people to check out, because they'll often, they'll be like, say, probably the biggest show on the planet for like podcasts. So if you get there, can make a big difference to someone's career or their exposure. And so a lot of people try to go there, and so you'll find a lot of cool stuff there. Let's see. All right, what else? Jordan Peterson. So Jordan Peterson, I found out through Rogan, and he's really incredible. Um, yeah, like just kind of very straight talking, and he's a psychologist. He's a clinical psychologist. So he had clients and was doing that, but also like a research psychologist. So he was, you know, running experiments and came up with, I think he had a role in the Big Five personality scale, which is like some way of measuring personality or whatever. But he's just really interesting, and he's very, very well read. He seems like obsessively well read, like the kind of person who can't sleep and and is just reading books all night, kind of thing. And yeah, also well dressed. I do appreciate his suits, very nice. And he, his lectures on YouTube are incredible. He has like lectures up there about like biblical series, like understanding the Bible from a psychological point of view, and how like a lot of the stories you could say, okay, maybe it's not true in a literal sense, but in a figurative sense, there's the stories, they have very, very powerful lessons in there, and so you can say there's truth in there, yeah, very, very, very interesting. He also has lectures on all kinds of stuff. He talks about totalitarianism, like Nazism and communism, and how that all worked, and how that totalitarian systems kind of take over. And he took a stand against the restrictions on free speech due to like gender, like pronoun kind of stuff in Canada, where they're trying to compel speech basically for the first time ever in the common law countries, saying, no, it's not just you can't yell fire in a crowded theatre, or you can't say these words which are offensive to people. But like, no, you have to use these words. You have to call that person that name if that's what they feel like. And he said, well, no, that's crossing a line. That should not be mandated by law. There should be a culture, individuals negotiating this together. There's no legal basis for this, which I believe is correct. And generally it would be counterproductive anyway. Like it pushes people apart, and it's just the wrong way to do it. So that got him, a lot of notoriety and a lot of pushback. And people say he's this awful person. You'll hit, a lot of people, I wonder if they've ever actually watched him for more than 5 minutes. Because if you hear him, you find a man who's very sincere, very honest, and really heart-centered, like really wants to help people. And millions of people around the world have been helped by him. People who are, on the edge of suicide, in the dark depression, and a lot of the benefit he's gotten for me and for many other people is just to kind of take responsibility, get yourself in order, snap out of it, stop making excuses. It's kind of like that tough love thing, like just but there's a kindness there, definitely, but there's also this kind of no nonsense thing. And I think for a lot of people in the modern world, we kind of appreciate that, not to have everything pilled and sugar coated, So fascinating stuff, very intelligent man, very well read. You'll probably, just by listening to him for an hour, you'll encounter a whole bunch he'll be dropping names of people to read, and that'll be, you could go down some fun pathways of learning there. Aubrey Marcus, again, through the Rogan podcast, I came upon him. He's got a podcast, the Aubrey Marcus podcast, and it's incredible. And that would be very similar to the Rogan podcast. Like, he kind of has a similar nature, like very, direct, honest, but he's much more kind of chill, I'd say, and kind of hippie, for want of a better word, than Rogan. And he'll entertain more like mystical kind of perspectives, whereas Joe Rogan's a little bit more maybe mainstream ontologically in terms of the idea of how things work, Aubrey Marcus. So if you're into mysticism and like esoteric stuff and like spirituality, the Aubrey Marcus podcast is so much great stuff there, great guests. He talks a lot about plant medicines and all kinds of things that, being a peaceful warrior, kind of sovereignty and self-development, and health, all kinds of stuff. So, all right, let's see, what else have we got? think that's 4. So we're a third of the way there. So what's my mnemonic device again? All right. Oh yeah, Dave Smith. So he's a libertarian philosopher kind of guy. He's a comedian, but he's very well read in politics and economics and I guess to some extent philosophy. And he kind of has a podcast called Part of the Problem, and he's really funny, but also, you know, he just really help you understand economics and a lot of the kind of misconceptions about the way things work. And so he's a great resource for getting deeper into free market capitalism, like libertarianism or classical liberalism, which are kind of, or anarcho-capitalism, these kind of terms. Basically, the idea that the main problem in society is actually the government, and that government is made of human beings. We love our brothers and sisters, right? Us against them ideology is not a good idea. We're not here to make anyone an enemy, but we must be honest. Otherwise, we can't identify the problems and make them better. And the fact is, the committers of the worst crimes throughout history have been governments. And the majority of governments throughout history have been oppressive. And at present, most of them are oppressive. If you look around Latin America, Africa, Asia, Europe, Oceania. Sorry, Australia, I'm going to call you Oceania. You know, North America. All over the place, the majority of the places, the governments aren't really helping out the people, they're helping out the members of the government. And basically you have a situation where powerful interests are able to purchase the government's allegiance and change the rules so that they don't have to compete with the little guy on a fair, you know, even playing field, but that they can skew the rules in their favor, or they can just use outright violence and the threat thereof and fraud just to take unfair advantage. So genocides, pogroms, brainwashing, disastrous policies, which, you know, ruined, you know, societies. But the war on drugs, war on terror, blowing up the Middle East. Apparently, no weapons of mass destruction. Well, at least there was some oil. What a coincidence, you know. So Gaddafi is about to get off of the US dollar and trade, you know, a gold-backed currency. So then the US dollar, which is not backed by gold, but is kind of backed by oil, which has value because the Saudis promise in return for protection, they will only accept US dollars for it. So that keeps the value of the US dollar higher, makes Americans able to live beyond their means. The petrodollar, that can be sometimes called. What do you know? He gets overthrown really quickly. And apparently Saddam Hussein was doing that. I don't know if that's true, but wanted to trade in euros. Anyway, you know, we could go down that if we want, but that rabbit hole. But you get the point that governments throughout history seem to have been the main purveyors of crime. And Dave Smith does a great job of kind of showing the idea of libertarian philosophy. Basically, libertarianism would be the idea of limited government, saying, look, government, there's a few different versions of it, but in a nutshell, it's something like have limited government, or some people would say no government. Personally, I would say for now, we're not ready for that spiritually. So we need limited government. But where you've got the government running the military to protect the borders from outside threats, the police to protect property rights, you know, and the rule of law within the state, the judiciary to apply the law and check are the police doing the job correctly, and, you know, keep an eye on everyone, and then the bureaucracy to implement all the whatever there is in the, you know, paperwork, whatever, and the politicians or legislators to kind of manage the creation of new laws. And I guess you could say the executive, like managing the whole system. But the idea that you should have that and not much more, you know, like you could debate how much more, but at the present, you can barely walk down the street without having to get permission from the government. There's so many things where like, oh, I have to go do this thing. I called someone, they never called back. I have to call them again. This very one-sided power dynamic where there's a lot of things where I could just do something and I'm not hurting anyone, but there's some crazy rule preventing me. And the idea that society would be far more peaceful, prosperous, and kind of happy and a better place to live, wiser kind of people with more opportunities, if we kind of shrank the size of the government a bit, and that they, for all the free stuff they give, they take with one hand, they give back with the other, because it has to come from our taxes, and that in the process they waste a lot of that money, and also a lot of it's used on just lighting, running their offices and the systems. And if you think about it, in capitalism, if you're not being efficient, or if you're not providing value for money, people don't give you their money, and you go bankrupt, you disappear. If you do a good job, people give you their money because they go, oh, what you have, I value that more than this 50 quid I have in my pocket. Take my 50 quid, I want that thing. It's more valuable to me. Perfect. For me, I have 10,000 of these things. I sell these things. I want your money. That's more valuable to me. And so you have these mutually beneficial, mutually voluntary exchanges, and everyone wins. And a healthy economy, seems, is just a decentralized network of these trades en masse. And the government should be there just to basically to enforce the non-aggression principle, which is the core of libertarian philosophy, which is you can do whatever you want so long as you do not aggress upon the body or property, which is an extension of the body of another, or the life, body, property, you can say that's all kind of one thing, of another being. So, don't restrict their freedom, and you have total freedom, whatever you want. Now, if you do aggress upon another, then they have the right to self-defense. So that's aggression is only permissible as self-defense. And of course, the government violates the non-aggression principle all the time. And so this is the kind of, and hey, I keep an open mind, so I don't know. I think there's a room for nuance. You could have a society where it's a little bit socialist, like you got the government providing certain safety nets and things. That's definitely possible, and especially as a transitionary phase while we get things in order. But it seems very clear that all the countries that have tried socialism, like, okay, raise taxes, and therefore, in order to increase the amount of government spending and government intervention in society and the economy, especially the economy, that doesn't work. It doesn't get good results. The evidence actually shows the opposite. And the argument is made that if we had the freedom that, say, the USA had during that period of the American dream, where everyone was this massive upward social mobility, where millions of people were moving from Europe to USA, and within a few generations, their kids are like, upper middle class, whatever. Like you have this, each generation is getting able to have better opportunities, because basically they weren't being taxed at all, but they weren't getting anything for free from the government. But the idea that created a prosperous, healthy society. That if we had that kind of 19th century freedom with 21st century technology, we would see prosperity that like the likes of which we've never seen before. So in a nutshell, Dave Smith does a much better job than me of laying these things out and going into little details of all kinds of stuff. And I think it's very interesting. Even if you don't subscribe to that idea, I think if you're intellectually honest, it's a great thing to check it out. At a bare minimum, you'll see what the wrong people think and be better able to prove them wrong in conversation. Or perhaps you will learn a thing or two. They go, okay, you're mostly wrong, but that's a good point. That's a good point. Okay, you can improve your perspective and free yourself of a few illusions. Or you might find, like I did, like, holy God, like this is a huge change of perspective. Like, oh, I was actually mistaken about a bunch of things. Like, interesting, minimum wage. Oh, interesting. I can see how that actually takes away jobs from the poorest people. It's like backfires. Want to know how that works? Look up Dave Smith, minimum wage. I'm sure he'll explain it better than I can. So I think it's time for a light. It's a bit dark in here. Oh, yeah. All right. So wrapping this up, So that's okay. Eckhart Tolle. Eckhart Tolle. Here, I'll cover that light with my man bun, more or less. So he is you could call a spiritual teacher. You could call a man. You could call a man who lives in the present moment. So he basically talks about this shift of consciousness that is happening to a small number of human beings on the planet, but it seems to be increasing very quickly. And I've experienced it to some extent, and I'm trying to make it happen more, which is the shift into peace. So stop running a million miles an hour, spinning your wheels, always thinking about the past and the future, or some imaginary time of like, oh, just lost in your thoughts. But all of which are a sort of virtual reality simulation running, behind your eyes. And someone says, Jamie, huh? What? Oh, sorry, I was lost in thought. Where is that? And basically you're in your mind. And he talks about, in a nutshell, how time and mind are two sides of the same coin, and that you can access true peace, which is only possible through exiting your mind. You can learn to use your mind, but basically you access this space, this silent space of pure consciousness, pure presence, and you are able to rest and settle, and you're just physically here, physical presence. You're just you and in three-dimensional reality, just sitting here or doing whatever you're doing or driving your car, and you actually see it. You see what's going on. You're like, oh, okay, here I am. You don't need to label things mentally. And this might not make sense. I guess it definitely won't make sense until you experience this shift. And he can teach you how to do that. And many other people too. But his book, The Power of Now, is incredibly practical for getting that done. And he's got YouTube videos and all that. But he's, a very funny guy. He's always kind of laughing and good-humored. But very profound if you're struggling with negative emotions or feeling frustrated or unable to kind of activate your potential. I highly recommend you get into him. The only time I don't recommend Eckhart is if I think people aren't ready for it. Like, oh no, you're going to think he's too crazy, he's too far out. But you'll get there eventually, But yeah, I think everyone should read The Power of Now in school. That would do wonders for society, because you don't need to have exactly his point of view, but he's pointing at, and he's not saying believe what I'm telling you. One of the things he's saying is you don't be attached to any of the words. They're just pointers. It's like that Buddhist thing. Don't mistake the moon for the finger pointing at the moon. So words are just pointers. They're just trying to communicate. They direct your attention to reality. But reality is here and now. It's all around us. And we have all these words, which are symbols, whether it's a visual symbol of ink, lines and curves of ink on a page, or a verbal symbol, which is a vibration, which I put into the microphone, goes into your ear. Your brain has learned to, if you speak English, your brain has learned to interpret that as certain meanings. If you speak, Portuguese, then you might be confused, unless you're learning both. Then, well done, Lucas. Good job. So, yes. Basically, it's all about accessing the power of now. So, becoming present, not getting distracted by the future, what's going to happen, oh my God, or the past, oh, that happened. Just be here now and just learn to, feel your breath, maybe put your attention into your breath or your body or something, then now to anchor it so that you can get outside of the stream of thoughts and you can start to, the crucial thing is remain aware of your thoughts. And then that awareness is actually the space or silence around the thoughts and even within and behind the thoughts. In a weird way, the thoughts are made of that silent awareness, just like the waves are made of the ocean. Like the form of the wave is made from the formless ocean. And so this is basically Sanity 101, is how to be properly sane. And the planet is basically insane on there's a spectrum between totally schizophrenic and like a Buddha, and most people are not sane, including myself, which is a crazy and humbling thing to have to acknowledge. But I do think acknowledging it makes you saner, and that this, it's a journey, and we can embrace the beauty of the journey, even if it's hard at times. So yeah, Eckhart, he's great. A New Earth is another really good book by him. That gives it more of a general perspective about the evolution of the mind, and how humans are not turning into AI robots. So that's what some people want. But the real evolution is an evolution of consciousness, and that the body has evolved to this point. Maybe it'll change a bit more, but basically we have the ability to transcend the old way of thinking, which is bound in with the monkey mind of approach and avoid, and just trying to control other people and perceiving ourselves as separate, us against them, and kind of becoming aware of the oneness of all things, and that, I'm a branch on the tree of life. We're all the same thing. And so that brings enormous peace, clarity, and humor. So speaking of humor, let me drink some water. Okay, Alex Jones. Ooh, Alex Jones says some crazy stuff. But if you look at the things people like 20 years ago were like, if you can even listen to him, he's been censored. He was the first person to be censored, I think, the first big person online, and everyone let it happen. And then now everyone else is being censored. Okay, it's like first they came for the communists, and I did nothing because I wasn't a communist. That kind of thing. But he's got a good heart also, and like Jordan Peterson or Graham Hancock, sometimes they will allow that energy of anger to come out. And, I don't really operate that way. I would be more like Eckhart kind of thing, like, I don't think you need that, or Aubrey Marcus, But I think it takes all kinds to make a world. And so I think, I can accept that people could have that stream of anger sometimes. And it doesn't automatically mean that they're an angry person or that they're a bad person. But mostly Alex Jones, from what my understanding, is he'll just be talking about things kind of in a more neutral way. It's crazy things, but emotionally he doesn't seem like he's angry. But then sometimes he'll definitely get angry. And it's kind of, geez, this guy's out of control. Like he's out of his mind, Now, I don't know how much of the things he says are true. There's a lot of stuff which just sounds totally crazy. But you look at his track record, the things I was like, okay, 10 years ago, like that can't be true. An enormous amount of that has been proven correct. And it's crazy, the things that are happening now, and like all the lockdown stuff, and all the WEF, World Economic Forum, and like all kinds of, transhumanism, or all these kinds of, crazy things, like a lot of nuts things where people go, that would never happen. That's a conspiracy theory. Then it happens, and they're like, well, yeah, of course, that's normal. It's like, but you're moving the goalposts. Do you have memory problems or an honesty problem? Because it's like you said the opposite. You said that was crazy very recently, and now you're justifying it. So it seems some people, unfortunately, are not comfortable with admitting government malfeasance, or the malfeasance of anyone who has power over us, almost like a Stockholm syndrome thing. Maybe it's too much to take, the idea that people who have power over us might be not acting in our interests, and so they'd rather bury their head in the sand, which doesn't actually work. But it, of course, it's like a thing, like, kids, if I can't see you, you can't see me, that kind of thing. So obviously we do it at some level, but I think, with the Alex Jones thing, I can understand a lot of people would think, no, that's just totally ridiculous. But I think it's really worth, paying attention. Like, I don't really pay attention to him that often, but I think maybe I should more often, because he will say things where it's like, okay, I don't need to believe all this, but then maybe some of these things I might go, interesting, that seems more plausible, and I can look into it. Or just to be aware of what the possibilities are. Like, I can just reject all of it if I want, but it's useful to be aware of what he is saying, given that he has been correct about a lot of things in the past. So I think he is kind of ridiculed, but he's a good example also, apart from just of like, actually, some of the more far out stuff of like, what are we going to find out in 10 years? Like, do we know all the secrets? Like, many secrets have been revealed over the last 10, 20 years. and many crazy things have been done openly, which we thought would never happen. And so is that, oh, it's all done? Like we know everything, all the secrets are out, and all the crazy things we thought would never happen are now have been normalized. Okay, finished? I don't think so. There's probably more coming, right? More down in the pipeline. And so it'd be good to be aware of that in advance to kind of cut it off or address it in as healthy a manner as possible. And so I think people like Alex Jones, they get a bad rap, but they offer a useful and role of even if they're totally wrong about 90% of the stuff, which doesn't seem like they are, but then at least, or like, some stuff where you're like, oh, that's totally wrong. How could he say that? Doesn't mean you need to reject everything else. Like people are not perfect, but you can use them as sources for your own research. So I would say he's very useful for that as, a kind of far out person to kind of think about and kind of open your mind as to, because he also has a lot of facts. He will mention things like Operation Northwoods, the Gulf of Tonkin incident, all these false flags where the US intentionally got into wars by lying to the public. And these are facts. Or, the agent provocateurs at the World Trade Organization thing in Seattle, or where he showed, they were wearing military-grade boots, smashing up windows, and that they'd shown, like, they were doing that so that they could bring in the claim that the protests were violent and shut them down. So there's all kinds of stuff like this. So I would recommend that. I wouldn't say endorse and believe everything he says. I would not recommend that. But I would recommend keeping an open mind and listening to Alex Jones. All right. Then... where does it get us? To Brand. Russell Brand. Yeah, Russell Brand is kind of like, also will open your mind, like Alex Jones, but less extreme. Like he will kind of be more like, okay, I don't know if it's just that he doesn't believe in all the things that Alex Jones believes about, like, say, global elites taking over the world and whatever, or Alex Jones, say some crazy stuff that seems crazy to the mainstream, but Russell Brand will kind of, is a bit of a bridge, I think. Like he will kind of tie it to things that resonate with a lot more people, like, how like this is classism, and, he's got that, lower class English accent, haven't I? So it's, money, power, blah, blah, blah. I can't really do his accent, but, he does a great job of like kind of tying it. He's also very spiritual. Like he, is aware of this oneness of all things, and, he's on the road to, his own awakening. And so he does a great job of tying it in a very peaceful, calm way, and with a lot of humor, alerting you to all kinds of crazy stuff about the machinations of power and unconsciousness in this world. People who are not aware of the oneness of all things, or who are willfully ignorant of it. And Russell Brand does a great job of like the Canadian truckers convoy, that kind of stuff. Like I was getting stuff from him where I couldn't see anywhere, and so he's a really good, just for pure news, like he keeps you up to date with a lot of really good stuff. So I'd say it's a bit milder than some of the stuff. He doesn't talk about everything, but he does, a very good job of like in a peaceful, sweet way, kind of keeping us, finding that balance between, spooky stuff happening in the world, and the humor and the love which we need to kind of be grounded in if we are to not just deal with these things without freaking out, but also to find healthy reactions, like solutions. So, okay. All righty. So, time's running out, so the present moment is running out. Oh my God, newsflash, present moment runs out. So let's hop along here. Okay. And then Wim Hof, the great Wim Hof, the Iceman from the Netherlands, who's broken 30-odd world records, and basically pushed the limits of the human body and changed. They literally had to rewrite the book, like medical textbooks, as to the possibilities of the human body, because he's done things which we believed were not possible. Basically, his method involves breathing. That's the main thing, like breath work. And so that alone, you could look him up and check out that. the Joe Rogan podcast, there's 2 of them, or I think maybe there's more now, but maybe just 2. But the first one especially, I think, but the second one's great too. But the first one, you get a lot of it. Even that would be enough. But you can watch shorter ones on YouTube of him talking about things, and he's got his own app and, instructors and courses he runs. But he's a really funny guy, really cool guy. And he's, very like heart-centered and beautiful. And he kind of talks about how the breath can, transform your life. So, but there's 3 pillars to his method. There's breath work, cold exposure. So you can take cold showers, or maybe begin it cold and then put it on hot and then cold again at the end, or just hot and then cold just at the end, or whatever. I do beginning cold, then put it to hot and then end cold. Or you can do proper ice baths and, sea swimming and things. But that triggers a lot of processes. Both of these, the breathing and the cold exposure, transform your physiology in ways which are very good for your psychology, basically. And so he's offering a kind of physiological route to awakening and health, happiness, strength, you could say peace. So that's really great. I highly recommend that. Rupert Sheldrake, he's this scientist, Dr. Rupert Sheldrake, who really amazing, very softly spoken, but he basically follows, as far as I can tell, and I've watched a lot of his stuff, he is a very rigorous scientist, following the scientific method, but he has a great video called the 10 dogmas of modern science, and he basically points out that modern science is not as scientific as we would be led to believe, and that in fact there is a lot of dogma, and like, oh, telepathy? Oh, there's evidence for telepathy? Pfft, I don't need to read those studies. There's no way, that's not possible because of ABC. It's like, well, if you're sure, why don't you read the study? No, that's okay. Like apparently people like Steven Pinker were like saying to him like, oh no, his position was, I don't need to read that because it's not possible. But Rupert Sheldrake's point as well, like the pattern throughout history is that we have our ideas of what's possible, and science teaches us, like, trial and error and evidence and experiments teaches us. And here's a lot of stuff about telepathy, morphic resonance, the idea of that things evolving through a kind of non-physical memory fields, these blueprints which kind of help things evolve. Very interesting stuff, but like I think you can find, apart from the telepathy thing, there's a bunch of things where it's very interesting to hear that the experiments he's done and, things other people have done but he's aware of, and kind of, like expand your idea of what's actually possible a bit, and maybe draw attention to the fact that science is not perfect. The scientific method is perfect when you understand that its limitations, but that scientists are only human after all, and they have this ego, careers, selective information, or these kinds of things, biases. Finally, who do we have? M. What does M signify again? McKenna. Cool. Terence McKenna, just for his use of the English language. Incredibly beautiful, lucid, flamboyant use of English. He is like a psychedelic adventurer. He's passed away now. His brother's still with us, Dennis McKenna. He's very cool. And kind of a botanist. But Terence, though, he's a bit wild. Some of the things, like, again, it's like a lot of the things he would say, I'm like, I don't know if I wouldn't believe everything he says, but I think he makes a lot of really incredibly good points, and really opened up my mind a lot, and also encouraged me with his beautiful kind of mischievously adventurous use of English. Really encouraged me to open my mind, and I think he has a lot of good things to say about psychedelics, although perhaps he's a bit of a wild man, so within balance there. But these are 12 people 12 souls, I believe, you will or may or could dig, and so I hope that's useful, and that's it for now. So I'll see you next week. Peace and love, brothers and sisters.